Hello, everybody. It's Susan again, and I wish you a very happy new year and all the best for your good, abundant health and prosperity and your joy and your peace all year long. And I wish that I could thank you all individually. I love your comments. I really do appreciate your support. And it's just been really fun these last 2.5 years building this community and learning from you as well what is important and what's less important to the world at large. So my voice is still a little bit wonky, still working through that. Looking forward to the sunny, dry days here. We have a lovely one today after a few rainy days. So I also thought I'd bring you some more cheerful news, and this is about Venus moving into Pisces. And this is going to be quite a long journey that Venus is taking in Pisces. She's going to be going through the sign really up until the end of April. And this is quite exciting because it's also a part of the Venus retrograde cycle, which happens in the 10th degree, actually the 11th degree of Aries. And that retrograde will be happening on the 1st of March. So we're going to try and track some of the major things that Venus is doing over the next couple of months. But I will just give you broad brushstrokes here, and then we'll come back later through the cycle when we're closer to the time so we can look at exactly what's happening. This is an overview, and then after the overview, we'll look at the sign by sign and how it will affect you both in Pisces as well as in Aries. This is part of the Venus star point. So when Venus retrogrades, it happens only every year and a half. A normal cycle of Venus is 9 months, just like gestation, human gestation. And if Venus isn't retrograding, she just cruises through the entire zodiac in 9 months. And if she's retrograding, that whole process of going through the zodiac takes 18 months. And that's what we're seeing this year. And so in 2024, Venus did not retrograde. We saw her appearing twice with Pluto, first in the beginning of the year and then in December when she joined up with Pluto again in Aquarius. And so this is also quite a new energy because this is the first Venus retrograde that we're having with Pluto fully into Aquarius. And at the same time that this is happening, just a couple of hours later, we have Mars retrograding back into its opposition with Pluto. So I did a separate video for that a couple of days ago, for a bit of a heads up. And you can have a look at that video to learn more about that. I won't talk too much about that here, except to say that it's very active at the time that Venus ingresses into Pisces. And so this we see happening universal time on the 3rd of January. So if you're in North or South America, that's the 2nd of January. You'll be noticing that. And everywhere else, it's going to be on the 3rd of January at 3:24 a.m. in universal time. And of course, I use that because that applies to most of you. You can just add or subtract according to where you live. And it's not really important in the sense that unless you're needing to set something up and start an event, it's not really important to know the exact time. It's just good to at least have a flavor of the day that's happening. Now, what's happening when Venus moves into Pisces, where she gains an enormous amount of dignity? She's exalted in Pisces. She loves being in the sign of Pisces because it resonates with all of the messages of Venus. And when she moves in there, we're going to have this opportunity to smooth out some of the rough edges that the Mars opposite Pluto will be bringing. But she's not entirely supported, and we have to recognize that at the same time. So Venus, when she's in Pisces, is ruled by Jupiter, and Jupiter is here retrograding at just under 13 degrees of Gemini, so it's not in good dignity itself. Jupiter itself prefers to be either in its exaltation sign of Cancer or in its home sign of Sagittarius, which is opposite Gemini, or of course its other home sign of Pisces. And at the moment, we've just also gone through, just a week before, the square from Jupiter to Saturn. And so there is a certain amount of feeling stuck, feeling like we're not quite sure which direction to take. And the danger of exalted planets is that sometimes there can be an enthusiasm or the exaltation, the exalted energy of the planet can have us really going forward without necessarily paying attention to the red flags or the things that we should be more realistic about. And I'll speak to that, especially sign by sign as we go forward, because that will really depend where it's happening in your chart. But it's actually not such a bad thing this time, because we do have so many things that are slowing us down and causing a little bit of stress and tension, or maybe a lot, that it's actually very welcome that we finally had this feeling of, okay, look, I have a higher perspective on life. I can look at this with an optimism and a sense of compassion and empathy that I wasn't able to access before. So this is for the whole month of January. Essentially, she's going to be going through Pisces from the 3rd of January through till the 28th of January. And the 28th of January is actually when she is sorry, no, not until the 4th of February. 28th of January is actually when she is going to be moving into the shadow phase. And the shadow phase is what happens when the planet is going to cross the point that it will return to when it's retrograded. So that shadow phase will only be done by the 16th of May. So I just want you to kind of get a grip of that. For those of you who've listened to my annual forecast, you've already had a glimpse of this and the cycle that Venus is participating in, which includes Neptune and the North Node, and even on the 1st of February, the Moon as well. We'll look at that. But this is something that is, it's going to have longer term consequences overall, because this is part of the Venus retrograde cycle that comes back every 8 years. I'll tell you those dates in a minute. But also, if you think about it in the medium term, it's going to have a consequence on what's going on 5 or 6 months from now. And pretty much, like I said in my December video about the December 30th Capricorn moon, that new moon was a domino effect that started off all of these things that are happening now, January, February, and March, that are pushing us forward bit by bit into this new feeling, this new energy, this new era that we're participating in as of 2025. And that's a process that's at least 6 or 7 months long. So pay attention to January, pay attention closely to your choices and to your desires and how you connect with people, how you connect to your own value, how you connect to what you value. So let's have a look just in terms of the astrology itself, and then we'll look at the dates and the transits. So this is an ingress chart. When we put the planet in at the 0 degree point of the sign, that's called an ingress chart. And that, of course, the ingress was on the 3rd of January at 3:24 a.m. And what's interesting about this is that Venus herself is not really nicely aspected. And that's a kind of a sign of the times. And that doesn't necessarily mean that the whole cycle will be difficult. It just means that at the time that we're trying to grapple with these things, because remember, Venus will have 3 ingresses into Pisces. There'll be the direct one now, and then there'll be a retrograde one, and that retrograde one, to get my dates correct, that's going to be the 1st of March that she stations. Oh no, that she stations into Pisces. So she goes into 4th of February. She goes into Aries. And then again, when she retrogrades, she's going to be retrograding back into Pisces again on the 13th of, no, that's not correct. Not the 13th. That's when she stations direct. Let's check, because I want to get this right. I don't want to tell you all kinds of nonsense. Let's just move her forward and see where she's going. So the first ingress is now on the 3rd. The second ingress is happening on the 4th of February. And then she stations retrograde. She comes back into Pisces. Whoopsie, went too fast there. She goes back into Pisces. Okay, here we go. And that is going to be happening on the 20. Hello, Venus, come back. Sorry, it's me. Venus, yes, 27th of March. So in fact, yes, that period of time is significant again. This I pointed out in the annuals as well. By the way, if you want a 25% discount, those annual reports are still available until the 6th of January. So you still have some days if you want to save 25% on the annual forecast for each sign. And here what we have is this repetition of what we had on the 1st of February. And so what I want to point out, these different phases that Venus is going through are going to recall things that we're already seeing now in January and into February. So it's a really interesting thing to take note or pay attention to who's in your life or who's leaving or who's arriving. And take note, because when Venus starts to move closer to Neptune and the North Node, things start to get a little bit wobbly. And we'll talk about that in a moment. Maybe just for the pure astrology of Venus in Pisces, this, as I mentioned, the compatibility between the sign of Pisces and Venus is because there is this receptivity to Venus. And Pisces is a water sign. It's a feminine water sign, and that causes the receptivity as well. So there's this feeling of not being assertive, aggressive, or tense. It's just receptive. It's receiving the energy. And that's where Venus does her best. She wants harmony. She wants beauty. She wants things to flow. Then that energy is going to change when Venus moves into Aries, which is the masculine energy. And it's inceptive energy. It's about getting something. It's about reaching out into life. It's about being independent, individual, and going for oneself, doing what one wants for oneself. Where Venus in Pisces is about everyone and everyone merging together, and the truth of our unity, the truth of our inseparability. And so when Venus goes into Mars, she loses a lot of dignity into the Mars root sign of Aries, actually. Sorry, not into Mars, but into Mars's sign of Aries. She loses a lot of dignity. And as a result, we're going to have this this kind of wobbly few months where we have this back and forth, where January has the focus of Venus in Neptune, with Neptune and Saturn in Pisces. And then a week from now, we've got the North Node coming in. And we're going to have a kind of a maybe overly optimistic or overly sentimental or overly compassionate take on things that may get us into trouble later on. We'll find out. Each individual will find out as we go forward into the spring. And then when Venus goes into Aries, the opposite might happen, where we're pulling back and maybe as a reaction to what we've been building up or what we've been seeing happening through the month of January and then later in the months ahead. We're going to see this kind of reactive energy where Venus in Aries is quite lighthearted. She's very fun. She can be very childish and immature as well, and not take really good decisions for the long run because they tend to be inspired by what this moment requires. So it's actually not a bad thing that we have this opportunity to reflect for a long time on the balance between the Venus in Pisces and the Venus in Aries at a time in our collective, and certainly no doubt individually, where we're really grappling with a lot of doubt and we're really grappling with a lot of things that are unpleasant to have to consider. And part of the Venus energy in Pisces is to try and spiritualize our relationships, to spiritualize our connection to people, to harmony, to the things that we appreciate. And this is, of course, in an ideal world, a lovely idea, but it's not necessarily how we can make that happen in the so-called real world. Now, Venus, as I said, is not very well supported. There's a number of inconjuncts and semi-sextiles. So she's, first off, she's inconjunct the South Node that she herself rules. And the South Node, just in the last half degree now of Libra, moving very quickly, because a week from now, by the 11th of January, the South Node will be in Virgo, and then Venus will no longer be ruling it. So this is a kind of a last gasp, and it's almost like saying, did we make it? Did we do the thing? Did we make the necessary sacrifices or adjustments in terms of how we connect with each other, in terms of how we connect with other people? And we also have Venus in an inconjunct, again, to Mars. And Mars is the other relational energy, the dynamic of the masculine energy, the inceptive or outward going and active dynamic energy. And this Venus in not an easy balance with Mars, and Mars being retrograde at the same time, is also part of the current dynamic where we're not really able to connect in a way that feels like we can make this last or make it stick. And by the way, if you are entering into a relationship now, it would be a good idea to give it the span of these next few months to test it. And I don't mean provoke the person, but to test the relationship, to test drive, let's say, the relationship, and also including business partnerships or including other ideas that you might have around connecting with people, around finances or love. Because whatever you think this is going to be, I propose you by May, it's going to look very, very different. So just give it lots and lots of space, lots of empathy and compassion, as Venus would want, as she's in Pisces, and don't set too many hard and fast plans or rules or agreements at this time. When Venus retrogrades as well in Aries, we're going to get another opportunity to reflect on all of those things, and I'll talk about that in a moment. So Venus is also in a semi-sextile to Pluto, which of course is in that opposition from Mars. And Venus is, of course, then semi-sextiling the north node, rather, which Mars is ruling and trining at this point. So the Mars energy, the incoherent energy, the tense energy is dominating at this time. When there's an inconjunct or a semi-sextile, it feels uncomfortable. It's like a lift or an elevator that's too full, and you feel like you just can't wait to get out of there, or you'd rather other people leave and you can carry on your journey. or you just wish that the person that brought their fast food lunch or whatever would just please get off. And so it's not easy. This is not an easy energy. And we also have a square from the moon, a very tight square from the moon to Uranus. And now Venus is moving, ruling rather, that Uranus, which is moving retrograde. So Uranus is in Taurus, retrograde, and it's going to be stationing direct at the end of January. So this is still a pattern that will continue while Venus is in Pisces. And again, that whole story of even what Uranus is doing in Taurus is not going to give us very clear answers. But when the moon is squaring Uranus, there's something here that's creating emotional tension or an indifference or some kind of a sense of instability. You're hot and cold. You're not quite sure what is the right approach. And at the same time, Uranus and Mercury are also in an inconjunct. We've seen this in the previous couple of videos because these aspects are holding for most of the week. And that also creates a tension around how we communicate things. And we're not really sure about that either, because Mercury itself, of course, is not in strong dignity. It's in its opposite sign of rulership. So it's ruled by Jupiter there in the sign of Sagittarius, while Jupiter itself is ruled by Mercury in Sag. So this is no longer really in a correct orb or a traditional orb of opposition. So we can call that a mutual generosity at best, but it means that we're not really getting much good out of this Mercury. The one thing that is actually quite supportive is that Mercury is sextiling the moon, and this can actually bring about some clear-headedness if we don't overreact or jump the gun and decide to do things based on impulse, because Mercury is in a fire sign, and Mercury doesn't do so well in fire signs because it's a sort of an action-oriented place as opposed to a thoughtful type of energy. Mercury is also in a trine from Chiron, or it's separating from a trine to Chiron, and that trine is now Chiron, by the way, moving direct only since the end of December. So again, newly moving forward, and Chiron is back at the same place that it was last April 2024. So we're recalling lots of things, and lots of things are kind of like noise in our head at the moment, like the kind of quality of confusion that says, I'm not yet sure what any of this means to me. I'm not yet sure. I just know that it all has to change. And this is the tension. It's like I said, just being on a lift, you know you're going somewhere, but geez, you wish that everybody else would get out and let you have more space, or that you could finally get to your floor and get out yourself. And so that Chiron is coming back now to cover the same degrees that it went from in the middle months of 2024. So we're coming back over old territory here. Chiron won't come back to this 19th degree again for another 49, 50 years. So we're covering old territory, and yet at the same time saying goodbye to a lot of things. We're saying goodbye and saying we're moving on here. We've done all of these things. Now, Eris, if we bring Eris into the picture, is also in an interesting sextile to the moon. She's also in a trine to Mercury, and she's in a semi-sextile to Uranus, which has been holding for much of 2024, actually. And so Eris herself is about where we feel something unjust or unfair, or where we haven't been seen, or where we haven't been acknowledged, where something requires attention. We're going to either have to accept that there is a hypocrisy in either our behavior or in what we're participating in, or we point out the hypocrisy of what's going on around us. And this is, of course, part of the big dynamic. This year, now we're finally going to get Chiron conjoining Eris and spending a lot of this year in a really tight conjunction with Eris, which it just kind of crept into in 2024 before separating. And so with Eris in a sextile to the moon, there's a lot of emotional frustration. And in a trine to Mercury that wants to say things as they are, we might also decide that we just want to correct the record. We want to say what needs to be said. And it may not be very graceful. And again, so there's this Venus trying her best, coming back into her happy place, but she's not really surrounded by, it's kind of like she came to the party too late. So Venus is sober and with the best of intentions and wearing her gorgeous outfit, and everybody else is already like hanging off each other and completely beyond connecting with, so this is this kind of energy where it's difficult. We have a goal, we have an idea of what it is that we want, and we know that this is not the moment yet. The other thing that's inconjunct is the sun in Capricorn at almost 13 degrees, and it's very, very tight here. It's an exact inconjunct. This is very rare because the sun moves very fast. So the fact that the inconjunct from the sun to Jupiter is super tight is extremely telling for me. This is a sign that there's something here that we're not really clear on. There's some wisdom and guidance and maybe even issues around responsibility that we need to take seriously. The sun is moving into a sextile to Saturn, and that's really helpful. So that sextile to Saturn is something that allows us to establish something of a structure going forward, but it's happening only a couple of days from now. So it's not exactly at the time that Venus is ingressing. It will be a process, maybe based on also what's happening with the Mars opposition to Pluto. So all of these things can happen in our individual lives, or they can happen, of course, in our collective lives as well. The inconjuncts, as I said, are things that require some kind of adjustment because there's a feeling of not being at ease. It's kind of like that feeling of being observed, or a feeling of somebody that you don't know or don't feel safe with is just a little too close, or they're out of your range. You can't see them. You're aware that they're there, but it doesn't feel comfortable. It feels either awkward to look at them, or it feels like it's scary. And this, I'm using those references only because this is the quality of the inconjunct. I'm not saying you should be afraid at this moment. Lord knows there's a lot going on that anything can happen at this point. But I'm just saying you take these references as archetypes, not as instructions. Okay. And so this moment, let's say, is in some way saved, and we're coming back to the topic of this mystic rectangle, by this interesting double sextile, and double opposition that is happening one last time between the nodal axis that is now at the very, very, the beginning of Aries, ending its journey through Aries, and the beginning of Libra, ending its year-and-a-half-long journey through Libra. And then we have the Mars-Pluto opposition, and the way that they're interacting is creating something that gives us a new opportunity. It gives us a new perspective on things. And what's very interesting, and I'm repeating what I've said in other videos here, but it's really important for this couple of months of the year, or really the 6 months, let's say, certainly the first 6 months of this year, and much of the winter and early part of 2026 as well, or what in the north is the winter. These are patterns that will come back or these degree points that will come back for our attention when we have the North Node particularly at what is known as the world point or the Aries point, meaning it's the very beginning of the zodiac in the tropical zodiac, or any zodiac. 0 degree Aries is the beginning of the zodiac. It's something that whatever happens will have either a long-term consequence, or the consequence will have an impact socially, culturally, and environmentally in the world around us. And or it will be that what we are doing becomes something that is affected, or that what we're hoping for is affected by world events, or by the public, or by the people around us. So this energy, this kind of action is very, very heated. This point of 0 degrees is very, very heated in this, basically, let's say year and a half ahead. And it's all the more important to remember that Venus will pass 3 times through that place, as well as the Neptune and Saturn conjunction happening at that place over the summer, over the mid part of 2025, and again in February of 2026. So we're looking at things that are, it's almost like a ricochet. There's something that happens and it bounces back, and then something happens and it bounces back. And there was this terrible event in Louisiana, in New Orleans, and that is what is known as blowback for all of these military interventions and the circumstances that are ongoing in Syria. And I don't want to say any more about that, except that is a vision, or a version, let's say, of what I'm describing here, in terms of how one event is going to have an impact globally, and equally that the global impact is going to have an effect on our lives. And especially as Pluto is opposing, or rather being opposed by Mars, in this interesting dynamic that is not communicating, that is not cooperating, that wants the best but can't find a way through it, this is a time to be very aware of what's going on, and also to be very clear how you might be contributing to it, whether it's individually or collectively, how you're reaching out into the collective. And it's extremely important to realize how our mood, how our words, how our actions feed into the energy around us. And so raging and pointing fingers of blame always backfires, because we're not taking responsibility for the energy that we're creating internally and also around us. You just have to spend a few moments with somebody who's fuming in anger to realize how incredibly toxic that is, especially to their own health. Right, so I've covered quite a lot here. Now I'm just trying to think how to go forward, because there's such a lot to describe. So what I think I might do is go to the 1st of February and just pick up on, maybe it's here. I want to show you this remarkable thing. Again, this is, remember, part of the story of Venus being here in Pisces, and it will come back. It'll continue to come back. Now, on the 1st of February, Venus is already in shadow, so she'll come back over this degree again, both retrograde and direct once more. And this is quite a unique and remarkable thing. So Venus is at the 28th degree with the Moon and Rahu and the North Node. And this has built up over a couple of days. So this is not just on that day. I would give it really the whole last week of January and the first few days of February. And remember that Venus moves into Aries on the 4th of February, just at the same time, by the way, that Jupiter will be stationing direct at this 11-degree point. So again, an interesting dynamic in that first week of February overall, but especially because this is very rare, that we have Venus, the Moon, the Rahu, or the North Node, and Neptune all in the same degree at the same point. It's very interesting. This point is the ending of the zodiac. It's the end of something, and we're looking at something that can be quite exaggerated. When Venus and, say, if you just take Venus and Rahu, Venus and the North Node together, they can be very exuberant and need a lot of attention, maybe attention seeking, or or just want to be recognized. They can be a bit flashy and maybe dressing in a way that attracts a lot of attention. And of course, that'll depend on the sign and the house that that's in, if you have that natally. It's about learning how to be in relationship, including with yourself. It's about learning how to be in harmony with other people. It's not yet acquired because it's the North Node. It's what we crave, and so we might do things that are actually quite exaggerated as a way of trying to get this. Either attention or relationship or whatever. With Neptune there, it can be really challenging in the sense of clouding judgment. This is what Rahu already does. Its color is smoky gray, the color of Rahu, because it obfuscates, it kind of hides things. And it's known for exaggerating or rendering people obsessive, especially when the moon is there. So we're now looking at potential for real extreme behavior. And again, if you meet somebody around this time, the potential, let's say best case scenario, is that this is literally the person that you have been waiting for your whole life. Your soul is recognizing the other soul, and this is the person for you. This would be the ideal. I would still say hang in there for a couple of months and see how all that pans out, because the notion of soulmates is not necessarily happily ever after. Often it's exactly the opposite. So just bear that in mind. It's often the people that you need to learn hard lessons from that we consider to be soulmates. But the romantic sort of rose-colored glasses phenomenon can be really, really strong at this point. It can be over the top. Now, on a creative level, if you're actively using this, or if you're using it for some kind of magic or some kind of occult, practices, this can be fantastic. Beautiful energy to call in. Of course, Saturn is moving along. It's almost at the point that it's stationed. So it's stationed retrograde last summer in the 19th degree of Pisces. So it's still moving into the zone, is still in its own shadow zone after all these months. And so we're still not yet really getting something out of Saturn. We're still not really sure what that Saturn is going to bring us. But it's slowly going to show up through February and into March, what that new territory is going to feel like. And at the same time, we also have a trine as Mars approaches a trine with Saturn. And this trine also holds for much of February. This is a slow-moving planet. Mars is moving extremely slow, and it's going to be stationing at 17 degrees of Cancer. So when it stations, it's 24 days later. So you see how slow it is. It's only going to be going for, from 20 degrees to 17 degrees in 24 days. So the appearance, of course, is that it's slow. Of course, it's not slow. The planet's doing whatever the planet is doing. It's just from the perspective of the Earth, the planet appears to be not really shifting position from our perspective on Earth. And of course, that is the case with every retrograde. And that makes the planet extremely strong, actually. I tend to use the Indian approach when we're talking about that. It's not that the planet loses strength. On the contrary, the planet becomes very strong because it's lingering. It's like it's forcing the topic. It's forcing the energy and building the energy. It's like revving one's, tires. If you're waiting at a red light, and you're revving the engine and spinning your tires, and then you take your foot off the brake and off you go. That's this kind of quality of that's the kind of quality of this Mars in retrograde. Sorry, I realized I'm talking all over the place. I had about 2 hours of sleep last night, so I don't know what happened, but I just couldn't sleep. So my brain is slowly getting into gear. We also have Mars ruling Chiron now direct again, and Chiron is in a square to this Mars. And so here we have another kind of a sign that says, are you sure that this is the right action to take? And are you dealing with your emotions in a way that is constructive, that will, when Mars then will actually move through this degree point later direct, that would be in April, are you then going to be able to work through whatever is going on in your life right now and be happy with the results? Are you able to move forward from where you are here? So there's a lot of introspection necessary. And there's a lot of caution necessary. As much as this can be fantastically creative, it's still a time where things are not exactly where they will bring us lasting results. I would say whatever is going to happen may happen. It might feel fantastic or not very good, and then it completely reverses, and it can reverse again. So we're looking at a spring full of boomerangs or flip-flops all the way through. We do also have this really lovely trine. This is now a separating trine between Jupiter and the Sun. And that trine is also including Mercury, which is ruling Jupiter. So with Mercury, Sun in a trine to Jupiter, we can't really give Pluto into the trine because it's out of degree, but we could keep in mind that Jupiter is staying very, very solidly at that place. So we might actually feel that. Now that can bring a lot of harmony. That can be very, very helpful. Again, depends on the place in your chart where that might be happening, wherever Aries is in your chart, back into Gemini. But this again refers to the energy of air signs and communication. So there may be something that once again needs to be reflected upon, communicated about, and understood better before you proceed rather. This is part of the Mercury retrograde cycle, by the way, because with the Mercury so close to the Sun, when they meet, they separate and then they meet again. That's part of the Mercury cycle. Same thing we'll see later on when Venus and the Sun encounter each other in March. Right, let's see now. If we want to go forward, we're going to go to when Venus now moves into Aries. So we'll have a look here at the Venus ingress, which will be on the 4th of February. Venus moves into 0 degrees of Aries. And at this point, she's again in an inconjunct to the moon, which she's ruling, which suggests that there's tension again, or issues around relationships that are not entirely clear. They're not entirely where we want them. We're not really able to connect or communicate. More importantly, we've got a square from the moon to Pluto. So while Pluto is in a sextile from Venus, Pluto at 2 degrees now of Aquarius, the moon is squaring. Hang on just a moment. Speaking of relationships, I've got to let my dog in. Right, Sandra, come. Oh, no, there's the one who wants to come in. There you go. I've got my shawl on because it's still cold here, even though lovely and sunny today. Right, so Venus is in a sextile to Pluto. So whatever's happening is intense. Pluto is being squared by the moon, which we can see is emotionally, potentially very intense, potentially also connected to loss or some kind of frustration. Moon squaring Pluto can bring frustration of people, the public, the general public, because that can represent the public. If we're looking at that from a mundane perspective. And since Venus herself has lost dignity, she's no longer able to really feel this positivity. She might be a little over-optimistic, a little happy-go-lucky, potentially also with that Venus in Aries quality, a little immature in the way that she's looking at things, rushing to judgments or potentially being too self-centered. That's another Venus in Aries quality, which is focusing a lot of the attention on oneself, and what do I want? That's not the best quality of Venus, because Venus, of course, is more about what everybody benefits from. So again, we're in this situation when Venus goes into Aries that we're still a little bit touchy. Things are not very, very clear. And we see that Mercury and the Sun are still tracking each other, as that is part of the Mercury retrograde cycle, as I mentioned. Then we have Venus going into her retrograde. I just want to see where I have that chart. Maybe I used it here, Venus. All right, well, what we'll do is I will move forward this way. And we're going to see, well, I don't want that. We're going to see that Venus retrogrades at 10 degrees 50 minutes of Aries on the 1st of March. Right. So here we've got this. Let me just pull that away now. I'm just going to give only the Venus retrograding now. So this is now, that's actually my birthday. That's my solar return. So she's retrograding on my solar return on my midheaven. So that'll be interesting. Watch this space. So here we are. So Venus is 10:50. Well, okay, I can't remember the exact hour, but let's say it's going to be on the 1st. There we go. So it's on the 1st of March, but only just, it's actually overnight. So we have this Venus at 10:50 in a retrogradation. She's conjoined to the moon, which also in Aries is not a great moon, because it's also in that place of what's in it for me. And the moon in Aries can be also emotionally impulsive, potentially quite abrupt. And then both of them are in a semi-sextile to the sun. And we still have this very strong influence of the North Node, because this time now we've got Mercury and Neptune on the North Node. So whatever's going on, the beginning, the 1st and 2nd of March, we're still not clear, because there may be some illusions, delusions, disillusionment, disappointment around what is being said or what is being reflected back to us. And we're not clear what to think about things. Now, again, on a creative level, this can be amazing. This can be fantastic. Very productive for anything to do with creative pursuits or imagination or creative arts and so on. Venus in Pisces all through the month of January is very strong for that as well, because that's also a very imaginal sign. But, nonetheless, we're still in this tension. Something's not quite comfortable here. We also have a square from the sun building to Jupiter, which rules it. And so the sun square Jupiter is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just that, again, we can overshoot the mark. We can be a little over optimistic around things. And just, I would suggest, if you have to make plans or if you need to do something specific around that time, that you take it lightly, or that you decide that you're willing for things to change, that it's okay if things are not going to pan out exactly as you thought, because it's very, very likely that they won't. We also have this perpetual trine that keeps holding, as I said, through February. And now it's building back up as Mars is moving now direct. Mars started its direct motion on the 24th of February, and it's in a trine to Saturn. And so that trine holds through most of February, most of March. And that is one of the really solid things about this time, that whatever we want or the things that we're trying to make happen, we have a guts and determination to do it. Now, is it the right thing to do? Is it the most appropriate use of our time, energy, and resources? That's the question that we're not really sure of. We won't be sure, I'd say, until after the Venus retrograde has run its course. And after many of these planets move away from the North Node. It's not an easy combination, having the North Node and all of these planets. You have a lot of more New Age astrology, or in the evolutionary astrology way of looking at things. Everything is about your personal growth. I spent a lot of early years in my training in the evolutionary astrology energy. And there's a lot of it's almost, it kind of borders on spiritual bypassing, which is to say it's all good for you. It's all for your growth and for your benefit. And if something's going to happen, it's because you're expanding into it and you're growing into it and you're learning from it. And that's all very fair, but it's not the way that most people experience life. And life actually can also be too much, and it can be difficult, and there can be things that actually bring us some real difficulties. So I don't tend to ascribe to that. Of course, it is the ultimate goal, and it's what we would hope we learn from everything that happens to us. But it's certainly not the number one significator for me of the Rahu on a planet, because Rahu is about expansion in a sense that it can be obsessional, or it can be just too much in one go. And it can be, again, that quality of not really seeing very clearly. So there's a competition whenever the North Node reaches a planet, much like with the sun. There's almost an energetic competition. Who's going to overcome? And again, it'll depend on who's the stronger planet in any given circumstance. That depends on dignities, but it's that competition that can bring out the best or the worst of a situation. Later on in March, we're going to see that Saturn reaches the North Node. It is already getting quite strongly in conjunction all the way through March. And then when Saturn reaches the North Node too, that can be a challenge, a really serious challenge that requires attention. So definitely take these things in a way that says, I'm going to be circumspect. I'm going to reflect deeply on what my long-term vision is, what my long-term goals are, and not trust necessarily what I'm seeing at this moment. And it doesn't mean that you shouldn't have faith or trust in anyone around you, but that you should be very, very clear, like a clear channel for yourself. What you're sensing may not be what is true, because the senses can give us misinformation. And this is the other meaning of the nodes, is that they disturb our senses. They disturb what we see. Neptune does the same. And now we're getting all of this connection, all of this colliding of Neptune with other planets and the North Node mixed in. So all of that to say, when Venus is retrograde and she's slow at this point, remember Venus moved into Aries on the 4th of February, and then she took until the 1st of March or 2nd of March to get to almost 11 degrees. So she's also very slow, just like Mars is at this time. So we're really contemplating something. We're really reflecting on something. And here, maybe I'll give you the dates for the retrograde, because we've been here before. The Venus retrograde point in Aries is one of the star points. Venus creates this gorgeous star in the sky when it does its retrograde, and it keeps coming back to more or less the same positions in the sky. And so the Aries point there, not the Aries point, but the Aries position is one of the star points. And so we had this happening the last time, March to April in 2017. It was roughly around the same degree, but it's not exact. So it keeps moving ahead every year, or actually moving backwards every year. Every 8 years, in fact. And then the time before that was 2009. And by the way, 2017 and 2009 was this combination between Aries and Pisces. So it went from Aries into Pisces again, as Venus was doing her retrograde, so going back over those two signs. And now all of the dates that I'm going to mention now are only with Venus retrograding within the sign of tropical Aries. So the time before 2009 was in 2001. And that was quite significant, because Venus was also square the nodes. The nodes were, we had the North Node at that time in Cancer and the South Node in Capricorn at that point. And Venus was square those nodes. And so that's, again, sort of March, April time of 2001. And then in 1993, you notice that these are significant years. So we have 2017, 2009, 2001, 1993, and 1985. These are significant years. And for me, looking just very briefly at political international politics, those were very key years where certain things changed, certain dynamics changed. In 85, for example, that was perestroika, where it was at its kind of peak. Gorbachev was really starting to open up Russia's economy and Russia's connections to the world outside. He started to see how important it was for Russia to save itself by opening up to the world outside and change the way that it was operating. And then in 1993, that was the first World Trade Center bombing. Dubious, to say the least. And I think that was also the year that there was a bomb. That was the Oklahoma bomber as well. Also very dubious, with now lots of evidence of involvement of the alphabet agencies like FBI and CIA and so on. And then, of course, 2001. So we're not talking about exactly the moments that these things happen. We're talking about a quality of the year. 2001, this would have been March, April again. And then 2009, so 2009, we're looking at the peak of the housing crisis as people were trying to find new ways through the economy after the collapse of 2008, trying to find new ways of moving forward. And then in 2017, also, we had quite a number of issues. We had the whole Trump story, and we had a lot of scandals around finances. We had what was the other thing going on in 2017? It was something on my mind, but it's not crossing my mind now. I'll see if I can put it in the comments later. It was quite significant because it comes back to now. 2017, you also keep in mind that these things are building. I'm going to talk about this a lot when I talk about Neptune moving into Aries, especially Neptune and Saturn with Neptune moving into Aries. This is creating a whole new cycle following a cycle where there was a beginning of a political ideology. Neptune and Saturn together create a kind of an ideological framework of change. And that was the beginning of this whole era from 1989 until now, which is not only about the end of communism, but more importantly, behind the scenes, the beginning of a very toxic anti-Muslim propaganda. And that's when the United States and its allies started to undermine all of these countries very, very powerfully in the Middle East. And that's part of what we're seeing now coming to a head now. So that's why what's going on right now, literally, as I'm talking to you on the 2nd of January, and this the Louisiana event where the guy had been in the US military for 10 years, but had this black flag of these Syrian rebels who were actually funded by the US, by the CIA. So it's just an endless story of deception and lies that leads to violence. And this Venus cycle keeps highlighting those specific years that keep calling all of this back in. Right. I didn't mean to go down that more depressing road, but it's really important to notice these things. Right. Let's see how Venus is going to move forward now. I'm going to have her go through, and she's going to go back into Pisces. So we saw she goes back into Pisces on the 28th. Hang on. There we go. She meets up on the 28th of March with Neptune. And at that point, she's back with the North Node. So whatever's going on now at the end of January, whatever is going on at that key turning point when on the 1st of March, when Venus stations retrograde, and whatever's going on at the end of March are going to be significant. They're tying in a bigger story together. And this, of course, is also tying in the Mercury retrograde, which I will talk about in a separate video, or will be here forever. So again, we have now a very, very close conjunction as Venus backs into Pisces, very tight conjunction with Saturn and the North Node, Venus and Neptune. And we might include Mercury in that as well. And why not the moon? Because only an hour or two later, the moon will be with Saturn. So we're really looking at, or maybe 3-4 hours later, we're really looking at something that is eventful and quite dynamic in this whole space of March, but it's already starting. It's starting today as I speak on the 2nd of January, and what could even have been described as beginning on the 30th of December at that new moon. And watch that new moon video, the Capricorn new moon video that I did, because I'm explaining that there as well, and how these dynamics are leading to something bigger and longer lasting than what's going on now. We also have at this time that Venus goes back into Pisces one last time. She is Uranus is direct, of course, from the end of January, and it's now in a sextile to Saturn. And this is a pushing and a pulling between the new and the old. So we have to decide at this point. A sextile requires our action. Uranus is is almost calling us in to decide now between the old and the new. And we saw that the Uranus through Taurus has a lot to do with a change of our values. We've gone kind of, the pendulum has been swinging since 2018 from the sort of woke, hyper woke to now conservative, neoconservative, hyper conservative way of looking at things and everything in between. And now, any time you get Uranus and Saturn in some kind of an aspect together, there's some push and pull that requires a reassessment of this present moment based on a previous moment, or based on the past, or based on what we thought we would conserve. And now Saturn is in new territory because it's now moving forward through Pisces, and it's going to continue at this point right through till 25th of May, when it leaves Pisces and goes into Aries. But Saturn is at the point where Venus will be coming back to station. As she's retrograding back through Pisces, she stops at this 24-degree point, and that's where she'll station direct. And that's on the 13th of April. So we have 2 more weeks of this particular energy being quite strong. And that's also where we find a trine still from Mars. So that's, again, a bigger, longer story that's unfolding through the spring or the first few months of 2025. Mars continues to be in an on-again, off-again square of tension, an aspect of tension with Chiron, and it's ruling Chiron. So part of our need to heal our identity, or heal the way we're showing up, which is also, by the way, part of the movement of Neptune going into Aries. I see that very strongly as a reinvention of ourselves, collectively and individually. A need to reinvent oneself, reinvent one's sense of purpose. So Aries is all about pioneering and engaging in life in an enthusiastic way, starting things, making things change, moving forward. But it's individualistic. It's like got this Wild West kind of flavor. And I think, in fact, when there was a Neptune-Saturn conjunction back in the years, in the 1860s, that was when the West was being really developed, and there was still quite a lot of wars going on. There was the peace treaty as well, with some Lakota tribes and the Navajo and so on. Of course, Neptune being involved, it didn't stick. It was totally illegitimate. So just another idea, for example, of what we're looking at here with this Neptune. And this time we have Neptune so many times repeating this very important degree, and all of the other planets are concentrated on it, as well as concentrated on the North Node. So Neptune in the highest aspect would be our capacity to be in a place of peace and compassion and deep connection, deep spiritual connection. But for most people, for most of the time, it's about illusion. It's about not seeing things clearly. And it's about the deliberate lies or the deliberate deception of powers around us, of people who influence, especially the media. For example, in the USA chart, the Sibley chart, Neptune is in the whole sign 10th house in Virgo. And so it's like saying we don't see what the US represents clearly. We see an image of it, or we don't see their rulers clearly. We see this projected image of them. It's the Hollywood version. We're not seeing the reality. Anyway, so that's one way of looking at this. So this is a time where we're really going to benefit from grounding and being very stable. Also because Uranus is very, very tightly sextile, building into this tightness of sextile to the North Node, as it's in a sextile to Saturn, almost exact within a half a degree. And of course, it's in a trine to the South Node as well. So there's something that we're changing based on our values, based on what we've understood about our values, based on what we've understood since 2024, because Uranus is just going over the territory that it was in at this point in about June of 2024. And it continues to go through these last 3-4 degrees that it already had covered up to 27 degrees in 2024. So we're still not yet in the brand new thing. We're waiting for the brand new thing. That comes more like May, June, and July. But nonetheless, we're still in this period of everything being questioned, everything being thrown up, and looking at things in a very, very different way. What else do we need to point out here? So Chiron is in that square to Mars, and I can't remember if I mentioned that significance, but it's that square is an ongoing thing that we've been seeing these last 3 months from the beginning of 2025. And that represents this questioning around the actions that we take, or around our sense of capacity to do things or to take action. And is the action based on wounding or emotions? Is it based on something that we're defensive about? Is it quite literally defensive action, if we're taking the example of a country? And is that the best way forward? So when Chiron is squaring Mars, often we find it difficult to express anger or to take action in a way that's constructive or harmonious. It's not an easy energy at all. Mars is ruling Chiron, but Mars itself is in very poor dignity. So there's something that we're not really, it kind of has this energy of shooting oneself in the foot based on maybe an overreactivity or a feeling of emotional impulse that can be there, maybe even unconscious, or a defensive impulse. And then, of course, we've got Jupiter, which is ruling the moon, which is squaring the moon at the same time that Venus has backed in with Neptune. So Jupiter squaring the moon, I mean, there are worse aspects, and Jupiter is also ruling the moon, but that moon in Pisces can be extremely sensitive again. So there can be, again, this issue of hypersensitivity, like I mentioned with the Chiron square Mars. Are we reacting in a way that is constructive? Are we reacting in a way that is taking on an energy of being a victim, or feeling self-pity, or feeling somehow hard done by? And I can expand that collectively, and even, of course, back to the individual self as well. We have Mercury back at the point. So again, this very famous point, anything within sort of 28, 29 of Pisces, let's say 29 of Pisces and up to 1 degree or into the 2nd degree of Aries, that's considered to be at the Aries point. So this is, again, the famous Aries point, or the world points, if you're looking at the Thema Mundi. And that is or the Anima Mundi is also called. This is where you are focusing a lot of the attention in the first few months of 2025. So if you have planets here, there's going to be an enormous amount of change, and you might feel that it's sometimes better to go into yourself, go into silence, go into a place of not knowing, and be happy with that space of not knowing. Because all of these conjunctions are about blending energy together. It's a pretty tough gig when you have to blend 5 or 6 different types of energies together, that some of which are competing energies. It's not like Saturn and Neptune have anything, really similar. That's why there's always such a big change. They want different things. They have a different agenda, as it were, metaphorically speaking. And so this is something that is hard to grapple with. And so don't hesitate to really hesitate. Don't hesitate to slow down at these key points. So remember, again, end of January, beginning of February, beginning of March, and the end of March. Just take your time, take a breath, let yourself pull yourself in to get a feeling of what is absolutely necessary to do, and what can you let go of, and see how things emerge. And especially if there's some turbulence around relationship, beware of what you say, because it's also difficult. Here's another thing, I should have mentioned this earlier. When Neptune, especially Neptune, but then Venus is on Rahu, on the North Node, integrity might be an issue. That can be where we find, let's say in a natal chart, it's not necessarily going to happen in a transit, but that's where in a natal chart we might see a tendency to be unfaithful, a tendency to have many partners, a tendency to, not be honest or fair in one's relationships, because there's this kind of a sense of things are happening a little bit behind the scenes. It's not very clear. again, this also might be revealed. These kinds of things might be what we become aware of as we go through the year, especially these early months of the year. It's like, oh, that, and then they did what, and then who did that, and they said this. And so it can also be a wee bit gossipy. It can be around, what, I don't know, more Hollywood stuff, or it can be political stuff. It can be financial things. All these things are possible. We've still got the Uranus in Taurus, so the financial story is still not finished at this point. But yeah, I mean, it's almost impossible to, you can hear I'm stumbling over my words. It's almost impossible to know what this is going to be like. So let's go forward to the 13th. On the 13th of April, we've got Venus. Remember, I said she was going to be where Saturn was. So on the 13th of April, we've got Venus stationing at 24 degrees of Pisces, and Saturn has just barely moved almost to the 26th degree. So it's still very, very, very much conjoining that Venus, and it's still with the North Node. So whatever's going on in mid-April, this becomes quite significant as well. Here we also have a very interesting semi-sextile with Chiron and the Sun to Venus. And Chiron and the Sun together, an annual conjunction, can also highlight something that might connect us to issues around leadership or issues around our own individual choices and what we need to rectify. That's also in an inconjunct, or rather a semi-sextile to Uranus, and then Uranus is in a very tight semi-sextile to both Saturn and, in a very tight sextile to Saturn and Venus at the same time. And of course, Venus is ruling Uranus while it's in Taurus. So again, we're looking back to this end degree. So 27, 28 degrees of Pisces is now where we find a now forward moving Mercury. Mercury did its retrograde phase, finished that up at the end of March, and now is moving forward through the rest of Pisces back into Aries, where it also stationed at 9 degrees, very, very close to where Venus is stationed. We'll talk about that, as I said, in another video. But it's also in a very strong trine now. So the North Node, Saturn and Mercury are all being trined there by that Mars. That is going to be intense. Again, we're looking at the middle of April. So this is a continuum. It's a continuation of the theme. Now the difference is that Neptune is into Aries. So Neptune is, for me, still very much in orb of a conjunction with the North Node. I haven't left that. I think with these very slow moving outer planets like Pluto, Uranus, Neptune, we can give them 3 degrees of an orb. If I'm looking in a natal chart, I would use my discernment, whether it's 2-3 degrees, or sometimes I'll give it a little bit more, depending. And of course, that dilutes the sense the farther away they are from each other. But nonetheless, this is something quite significant, because we're looking at the end of the cycle of Mars going through Cancer in very poor dignity, and it's just about to reach its opposition once again. So it's already within an orb of opposition to Pluto. And from the 14th of April till the 26th of April, when it's exact at 3 degrees of Leo in opposition to Pluto again, that is going to continue. This tension is going to continue. We still need to trust, or try to, let's say, we need to beware of over-trusting, beware of the trust that we put in what is said to us, what is communicated globally or publicly or through official channels. We need to, and this is Venus in Pisces as well, we need to be careful where we are maybe being tricked or being propagandized to hate one another, because Venus in Pisces is about this compassion for one and all, about finding love beyond the egoic self. It's like, if we think of the expression, the greeting namaste, when you say namaste or namaskar to somebody, the Sanskrit expression is, it's not with my mind, nama, it's not with my mind. Namastu is namaste. So without my mind, I'm greeting you. I'm greeting you beyond this everyday mind. I'm greeting you from this place that is not my mind. It's the consciousness in me that is greeting the consciousness in you. And that's the Venus in Pisces. But all of this confusion and disruption around all of that can also have us be a little credulous, because Venus, the sign of Pisces especially, can represent naive energy as well, being naive, being overly kind, being overly optimistic. And Venus in Pisces particularly so, because she wants that harmony, she wants that connection, and she wants things to work out. And so it can actually lead to us being too credulous, but even including credulous in the sense of what we're believing about what might not be true about other people. We still have that Mars opposite Pluto, remember, so that's something that we really have to contend with. And then, of course, Mars is building to a very, very strong trine to Neptune all this time. So we can expect, I think, also, just like we saw in 1993, just like we saw in 2001, just like we saw in 2017, what was it? I can't remember now what it was. False flag operations and things that were not what we were told they were. So it's a wild and wacky ride. We will, if we can hold ourselves to a high standard, and if we can hold ourselves individually to the place that we want to continue to move towards, we can make some extraordinary progress and some extraordinary change. But we have to be really careful how we might get dragged into what's going on in the world around us. That's that Aries point, the 0 degree, 29 Pisces to the 1-2 degrees of Aries. That point is where things have this consequence on an individual and a global level simultaneously. So, like being caught up in a conflict, and you thought everything was fine, and then all of a sudden you're caught up in a conflict, and now the world events are affecting you personally, or you cause a scandal, and now that's going out into the world, and you have caused something, depending on your circumstances. So it's a delicate time, a delicate year for sure, and it's going to take us into a completely different vibe. Now, Venus is going to go all the way through Pisces again, and she's going to re-enter Aries. And there we have Venus, boom, again at the Aries point. It's the very end of April. She's going to move in. So it's actually technically on the 30th of April that she moves back in to Aries, and she will then, of course, get back with her old friend Neptune. By this time, Mercury is moving quite faster, a lot faster, and so is Uranus. So Uranus is now moving faster. It's at the point that it was in July of 2024. Now Uranus is in its exact sextile to both Saturn and the North Node, and it's in its trine to the South Node. So Saturn on the North Node can be some serious restrictions. It can be serious restrictions around everything that Pisces represents, which happens to be, again, this collective potential or potential for travel, potential for gathering, potential for anything to do with water, anything to do with health and healing. Beware of stories around pandemics. You should even question the premise of a pandemic. It's actually not even really possible to have you can have an epidemic, you can have localized illness in different regions and so on. But the idea of a global pandemic is a falsehood that was also spread in 1918. And you have to read, it's really worth reading the history of so-called Spanish flu and the exaggerations, lies, and the similar agenda to what we experienced 5 years ago. So all that to say that this can reoccur, and all the more so because at that same time we've got Jupiter with the moon. Like I said, it's actually on the 30th. So let's see, maybe I took that back. Let me pull Venus here. Venus on, yeah, there it is. Venus into Aries on the 30th of April. Let's do it this way so we got the correct chart. And so Jupiter is with the moon on that day, and very significant because it's building up to a square to Saturn and the North Node. So by the time the moon hits that square to its own nodes, we will know whatever that event is all about, or it'll be a trigger for a bigger event. So Venus is now going to continue her journey all the way through, sorry. Yeah, we'll do it like this. Hang on, I'm going to just put this up here and take this one away, in which Venus is now going to continue her journey all the way through to the 10th degree, 11th degree. So 16th of May is when she covers the what is called the shadow phase, started on the 28th of March, and sorry, the 28th of January, we started the shadow phase, and we get all the way to the 16th of May, where Venus finally leaves this shadow and she starts to cover new territory. So we're looking at the middle of May before we know really fully what all of this meant between now, as I'm speaking to you, and 16th of May. So then, of course, at the end, 25th of May, we've got Saturn moving into Aries, and this changes the flavor of all that's been going on. That's for another video. I'll do a separate video about the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. But just to keep tracking Venus, she's going to move out of Aries and finally go into her home of Taurus, and that's on the 6th of June. And so that's going to be a very relieved Venus, because that's quite a lot of change, where she goes through her place of exaltation, but with so many challenges and so much competition. When Venus is with the Sun or with Rahu, that she's not able to shine. Venus is the beauty of the night sky. Venus shines. And when she's with the Sun, or when she's with Rahu, and or worse with the South Node, Ketu, she's prevented from shining. It becomes gaudy. It becomes either excessive or nothing at all, or she's had her shine worn off. So also when we see this energy, we once again get these interesting oppositions. So just as Venus goes into Taurus, we've got an opposition from the Moon to Chiron, which is now conjoining Eris. So many things. And in trine to Mars. Oof. All right, that I'm going to have to leave for another video. What I want to do is come back to this moment. I'm going to come back to the current transits, and we're just going to push this forward. So Venus is in Pisces, and we're going to go to, let's go to Aries on the ascendant, and we're going to see what's what. My goodness. All right, so Aries, Sun, Moon, and Ascendant sign. And somebody asked in the comments of a recent video, why do I say Sun, Moon, and Ascendant? How can all three work? It's because of something we call derived charts. If you use a derived chart, you can take the ascendant and start the chart like we're doing here with Aries on the ascendant, that we count the houses from the ascendant. But you can do the same if you put, for example, we do it like this. We put the moon on the first house. Now we've got the moon as if it's the ascendant, and we're deriving the houses from the moon, meaning deriving means to deduce, or to take things from the place of the moon and put them into the new place. So from the moon, we now have 1, 2, 3, 4 houses from the moon. Then if we keep doing that, we've got the sun now on the first house, and then the sun becomes the ascendant as if it's the ascendant, and we derive all the houses from the sun, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. So that is how we get to this place where I can say, this is for Aries, Sun, Moon, and Ascendant, and read in the description box below how each of those will affect you. And so here we have this event, this Venus ingress in your 12th house. And then later on, of course, the retrograde is going to be in your first house. So for Aries especially, this is a really good time for you to reflect back on all those dates I gave in the beginning. So that is from going in reverse order, obviously now in 2025, and then 2017, 2009, 2001, 1993, and 1985. And if you want, you go back to 1977 and 1969 and so on. It depends on your age. I'll leave it to you to do the math every 8 years going backwards. And that would be Venus roughly around this Aries or retrograde point. I think beyond the 60s, it starts to go into Taurus. So I think it doesn't work anymore. Somebody can correct me on that. But nonetheless, for Aries, this is very significant. So Venus is moving into your 12th house, where she's going to be spending a lot of time there between now and the beginning of January and May. And so a lot of your life story is going to be behind the scenes around relationships, and then what you want to do about that as Venus goes into your first house. Check all the dates as I gave them in the introduction. And so this is part of a story of you understanding something about your inner world or your intimate world. If you have a relationship that's going on, perhaps at a long distance, somebody who's far away from you that you can't connect with because there's a physical distance, or you are connecting with, but it's difficult to announce it, or it's difficult to make it real. This is part of the dynamic around that. So be careful when there's a Venus retrograde in these two signs. If you are in a relationship that should not be happening, meaning that it's you're interfering with somebody else's relationship, or it's a financial relationship that is awkward or difficult, for example. This can also be where you are more intimate in terms of your own time, your time that you spend with yourself. You prefer more personal intimacy, or with your lover, or with your partner. You just want more intimacy, and you're quite happy to be a little bit away from the world, moving away from the dynamic of the world. Venus in the 12th is also excellent for counseling, or if you do any kind of work like that as a counselor. It can be really harmonious. It can bring a lot of benefit, can bring a lot of healing as well. If you have the option at any point along the line of this Venus movement through Pisces, it's a fantastic time to go on a retreat, especially when Venus is retrograde. So when she's going through, for example, when she stations retrograde in your first house, that's the 1st of March, and she goes all the way back into Pisces and then continues till the 13th of April. So that chunk of time, whether she's in your first or 12th house, would be fantastic for a retreat, fantastic for, or even if it's just like a way of pulling yourself back, pulling yourself into yourself to understand your needs better. When she moves into your first house, it makes you feel very positive, very happy in relationships, very enthusiastic in relationships. But do beware that because of that retrograde, you might jump into something in a relationship that later on requires some renegotiation, that requires some new vision around the relationship. And this is particularly strong for you, Aries, because Mars is in your 5th house of love affairs, and that's where Mars retrograded. So there may be something here about relationships in your life that that's a little bit hot and cold, or a little bit on and off, or that, again, circumstances might have you feeling like you can't get into the relationship for whatever reason. There might be something of a geographical issue or other issue that's blocking you from connecting. And this is all the more so because we've got Jupiter in a square to Saturn. Of course, the most important relationship we have is with ourselves, to be very corny. And that is also an opportune time for you to really reconnect with your own spirit. So that 12th house represents spirit, your inner connection to God or spirit, or ancestors, whether they be our biological ancestors or our DNA sort of family, or if they are our spiritual ancestors and guides. So this could be an opportunity as well to try and bring more of your attention into that part of your life. Right, so Aries, good luck with all of that. I'll see you in the next video. Taurus, this is actually wonderful. It's your ruler, Venus, who's in Pisces, where she's exalted in your 11th house. So there could be something really dynamic happening around relationships in terms of like social acquaintances and your social networks, and associations with people based on politics or some kind of religious or other endeavor. And it can also be something to do with just acquaintances. But also, this is a house that is ruled by Jupiter currently in your 2nd house. And with Venus moving through there, it can be something to do with gains as well. Saturn, which is ruling your career, is in the 11th house of gains. Jupiter, which is ruling the 11th house, is in your 2nd house of money and earned income and your valuables. And although it is retrograde, it will be stationing on the 4th of February. So it could be that just as Venus is changing signs as she goes into your 12th house, that the promise of this, whatever this gain is or this new thing, is going to pan out for you. or it's going to be clarified in some way. It's anyway very nice having Venus in the 11th because it's partly where we socialize. So it's where you might want to have new interactions, new friends. Remember, it's your ascendant ruler. It would be ruling your sun or your moon, depending. And so there's something quite dynamic at this time for Taurus. It feels very positive. This is about re-establishing new connections with people, especially as Saturn is in your 11th house for a long time, since March 2023. So you're re-establishing new relationships, new friendships with a purpose, with people that you know because of something that you do together or something that you believe in together, for example. And it can also be that you're seeing a new vision for your future, something that's very different, especially as you've got Pluto in the 10th, and something that you're challenged to see differently, because now, as of the 11th of January, we've got the North Node moving into your 11th house where Neptune is currently. It's already conjoined, so watch the introduction if you didn't already, because it's all there. And so that North Node conjunct Neptune is also like kind of the fireworks that sets off this whole big year and a half of attention that pulls a lot of your energy into that 11th house for quite some time. I'll be doing a separate video on the nodes, so I won't talk more about that right now. Right, so what else do we need to say? I think that's just about it, Taurus. So when Venus goes through Pisces, and by the 1st of March, rather by the 4th of February, she's going to go into your 12th house, where she stations on the 1st of March and goes then backwards into your 11th. Sorry, just give me a second. Right, sorry, Taurus, I needed to take a drink there because my throat's getting really dry. Right, so Venus is moving into your 12th. As I said, she's retrograding on the 1st of March, and then she'll back into your 11th house again. And from the 28th of March, she goes back into Pisces. And that's going to be until the 13th of April, where she stations direct in Pisces and then moves out, and only finally clears this place in your 12th house where she's stationed in mid-May. So by the time some of you will be having your birthday, you're going to have Venus only just covering new territory in your 12th house. Now, Venus in the 12th house can be showing up something about your unconscious mind, about what's hidden from you, what's not clear. It can be around your spiritual connection, or people that you're connecting to from past lives, or spiritual guides, or people who have passed, like ancestors potentially. Or it could be people who are far away from you, people who live far away from you. And there's a new harmony, new desire in that relationship. Venus, of course, is your ruler, so it's kind of like saying you're putting a lot more attention there. But when Venus goes into the 12th, there can also be a desire to retreat, to move into a place of quietude, to move into a place of calm. And this would be an excellent time to do that if that's the case. Venus can also represent money, of course, and resources of all kinds, financial security, as well as relationships. And when she goes into the 12th house, especially as she loses a lot of dignity, you have to be careful of anything around loss, financial loss, loss of property, and so on. And this can also be where there might be a reason to understand your unconscious mind, but in the sense of what might have been making you ill, where there may have been some kind of solution now to a health issue that you're realizing is coming from either bad habits or coming from a mindset that you're holding, for example. Right, so Taurus, good luck with that, and I'll see you in the next video. Gemini, Venus is moving into the top of your chart in your career house. And this is really significant because that's going to it's going to highlight your career. It's going to highlight connections that you have with people based on your work outside the home. So whatever you do outside the home, or in terms of society or your social status, it becomes very important. Venus, of course, can represent relationships of all kinds, but especially in the 10th house, your business relationships or your life partner. So there might be something significant that either a meeting or something significant that's happening for you around this time. And as Venus is going to be very prominent through the 10th, really all the way through the first few months of the year. Please listen to the intro. You're going to see something here that can be quite favorable to you, but it may not stick because there's so much coming and going, or it may be that you have this new opportunity or a new sense of ambition and a drive in your career. 10th house is about your sense of aspirations and so on. Maybe you're aspiring to a new relationship or there is a new one on the horizon, but you're not really sure. Like I said in the intro, be sure to road test relationships at this time and not jump in too fast. Then Venus will go into your 11th house. And as she goes into your 11th house, that's the house of your, well, it's your vision for the future, how you see yourself going into the future, the aspirations you have for your life in general, and also your friends groups, your social connections, how you connect with networks of people. And it's also the house of gains. So it might be that Venus is going to help you by giving you some kind of bonus or that you will receive some kind of gain, but it may not be entirely what you expected, especially as Venus will be retrograding there. So it's really helpful to understand what that might represent for you if you go back over the different years that I mentioned in the intro, so 2017 and 2001, etc., 2009, 2001, etc. So go back over those years and see what was going on then, and you'll get a kind of a sense of what's going on in your experience this time around. Of course, you still got Jupiter in your first house, so you are really set for something to move forward, but it's not likely to happen until after February 4th when Jupiter is stationing direct. But by that time, Venus moves into your 11th house and she loses dignity. So, and Jupiter is no longer ruling her. So pay attention to what's going on in January. And then you'll see that it might repeat again when Venus comes back in April and you go back over this whole scenario, or back in March, April, and you'll go back over this whole scenario where you can finally get to the root of it or get the fruits from what you're doing, particularly strongly as Venus will move then into your 11th house again. And by the 16th of May, she'll be back where she's stationed. And whatever, if you haven't got the solution or the answer or the prize or the payback or the bonus that you were hoping for, that by the middle of May, that might come to you, might make a lot more sense. So I would have to see your individual chart to be able to be more clear about that, but it looks like it's something very promising out in the social world or in your professional realm. Good luck with that, Gemini. Cancer, this is happening in the 9th house. So Venus is in your 9th house of your higher aspirations, your capacity for teaching and learning as well at a high level. This can be around God or what we call the road to God, or what you believe in, what you have faith in. And it's also about expressing information. So whether it be teaching online or teaching through some kind of platform, or perhaps even through published work. It can be the 9th house is traditionally the house of publications and dissemination of information. So it can be something to do with that. And we've got Jupiter ruling that from the 12th house, and it's still retrograde. So it may not be that as long as Jupiter is still in the retrograde, it's not necessarily going to be easy to accomplish whatever it is that's going on there in the 9th. This could also be with reference to teachers as well, or people who are of use to you in the sense of giving you good counsel. It's the house of astrologers as well. 8th and 9th are the houses of astrology. And so if you're interested in learning astrology, or if you're interested in deepening your understanding of that, this is also a really great time, particularly as you have Jupiter in the 8th now for 20 years, and you've got, you've got Pluto in the 8th and you've got Jupiter in the 12th. So this gives you a real insight into something behind the scenes, as it were, behind the eyes. Then Venus will move into your 10th house of career. So again, go over those dates and see what was going on in your career or your sense of ambition or your social status, your status with reference to your marriage or to your parental status, to the relations with your parents. For example, go back over 2017, 2009, 2001, etc., etc., and look at what was going on at that time. Venus retrograding in those places is going to show you what it is that you're not quite okay with, or what's not really appropriate in this time that you need to reconsider. So there may be part of your job that you don't like, or part of your daily activities that you don't like anymore that you know you need to change. Or there may be something that you're not aware of yet, but you become aware of when Venus moves into the 10th house. Because especially with the retrograde station and the fact that it's happening around the time of the eclipses, things can change in a radical way. And I forgot to mention in the intro, I forgot to mention that Venus is actually going to be stationing at the degree of the eclipse of the 29th of March. That's really important, and that's something that that you want to bear in mind as well. So that 29th of March eclipse is a really big part of this story of Venus. And that 9-degree point. So many things to say. I forgot to mention that. That's an important one for you, particularly because it's an angular house for Cancer. So this has a lot to do with career, has a lot to do with your relational status, your social status, business partners, life partners, ambition, and so on. And this is going to be a long process. So don't worry if, as we're speaking to you now, if you have no idea what it is you feel like you should be doing, what's my mission, what's my purpose, how do I reach out into that? Don't worry about that, because this is going to be helping you move yourself towards that, especially as the eclipses are happening at the same time. All right, so good luck with all of that then, Cancer, and I'll see you in the next video. And Leo, this is happening in your 8th house of other people's resources, other people's money, how you share money, shared intimacy, what intimacy you connect with other people, whether it be psychological, emotional, or sexual. So this can be very good for relationships, especially as Saturn has been there in the 8th house. There may have been a feeling of being isolated or not really supported. And when Venus goes in there and then keeps coming back and forth, you get quite a lot more support. You get a lot more help from other people. Then Venus goes into your 9th house, which represents your higher purpose. It represents the thing that you feel you're here to do, or that you'd like to do in your life, what your vision for life or your sense of purpose is. And as Venus goes through there, she's going to retrograde. So again, listen to the introduction and hear more about that Venus retrograde story. And then also this dynamic is going to continue all the way from January through till May. So we're really looking at an extended period of time where the 8th and 9th house are extremely important for you, and all the more so because that's where the nodal axis is shifting. And as the nodes are shifting into your 8th house, the emphasis is going to remain there for a year and a half. So there really is something here very, very significant going on in your 8th house of other people's money that is changing the way that you relate to money. And maybe Venus is giving you a bit of a gift. We also, of course, you still have Mars in your 1st house. So there's a significant connection there between the Mars that's in your 1st house and the 9th house, where we find the North Node now. And that's where Venus will be stationing retrograde later on the 1st of March. So there's something here about you, the actions that you're taking and the things that you need to do that may keep you initially up until sort of April. It's going to keep you perhaps feeling like things are not moving ahead, or it's all happening kind of behind the scenes, behind closed doors. And it will maybe only feel like by the end of April that things start to really take shape. And honestly, even possibly from the middle of May, before Venus clears that point in your 9th house and then takes herself into your 10th house of career into June, where you really start to reap some benefits of whatever has been going on there in terms of career changes or exchanging money, resources, and others with other people, and how you manage your money or other people's money. This can also be about your marriage, an issue with the marriage or an issue with relationships that might be requiring you to focus a lot of things around money. that looks like it can be resolved in a harmonious way if that's the case, alimony and things like that, because it's Venus after all, so it looks favorable. So yeah, good luck with that, Leo, and I will see you in the next video. And Virgo, this is happening in your relationship house. So we've got Venus moving into your seventh house for the whole most of January and much of the rest of the early months of 2025 as she goes back and forth between your eighth and seventh. So your whole vibe at the moment focuses a lot on other people. So you're really putting a lot of your attention on relationships, on how you share money with the people in your life, especially your loved one, marriage issues, marriage partnerships. It seems quite favorable, but it seems like something that requires a little more attention, or that might require some new way of finding the relationship, because it's going to be a lot of energy building up in your seventh house with the North Node, Neptune, Venus, Saturn, and Moon, and anybody else who piles in there. Mercury is coming in there too. So between the seventh and the eighth house, we're looking at issues that take you from relationship into what you gain from relationship, or what relationships contribute back to you. That can also include relationships with clients and how you earn money from clients, and how that might need to change as well. It can also be about intimacy and how you engage in intimacy and how that might need to change. And something needs to be renegotiated on that front, whether it's emotional, psychological, or sexual intimacy. And but this is the big theme, really. The eighth house is also psychological place, so there might be something that you're really focusing in on in terms of your psychological well-being, and you're realizing you now need to consult with somebody. You have counseling. That's also an eighth house kind of energy, where you might be discussing, psychology or your emotional nature. And Venus in the seventh can help you find a person that can help you with that, can help you find the types of relationships that would support you in that. Venus is also ruled by Jupiter in your 10th at the moment. So this can have something to do with marital status. Jupiter is retrograding. And so there may have been some questioning or decisions to be taken around that issue, around marital status or career status, career choice, career direction, your career aims, for example. And that Jupiter will be stationing direct on the 4th of February, which is the same day that Venus moves into your eighth house. So there's some story here connected to what happens in February in terms of the resolution of what's going on through January. And the story will repeat. Look at the introduction, because it comes back and forth without a final resolution until we really get into the middle of 2025. And even then, who knows? It's very difficult times to interpret, because there's so many moving parts, extremely intense energy. Let's say, no doubt, relationships will be changing your life in 2025. The quality of your relationships, the way that you are engaged, literally or metaphorically, in relationships, and also how you are coming through in terms of relationships, because the South Node will be moving through your house as well, starting the 11th of January. I'll do another video on that. And that's going to change you as the North Node moves into the 7th, where there's quite a lot of focus on relationships anyway, even without Venus. So it's just an extraordinary year. And I wish you all the best, Virgo, Sun, Moon, and Rising. And Libra, Sun, Moon, and Rising. And this is all going to be happening between your 6th and 7th houses. The 6th house is your house of everyday work, your illness, or issues with health, or things that you do to prevent illness, things that you might need to do to create a better schedule for yourself, or better work environment for yourself. It's all the things that require your attention in terms of the everyday. And it's also work colleagues, or the people that you might have working for you, and anybody that you might need to tend to, like household staff or pets, or that kind of thing. That's something that you're taking responsibility for. So that seems to be working more smoothly, although Saturn has been sorting that out, making that region of your life, or that area of your life, a little bit more serious, or a little bit more long-term. focused. And then when Venus moves into your seventh house, there could be some issue around relationship that requires some attention, a reflection on business partnerships, or even your marriage partners, something that feels like it needs to be reflected on. And if you go back over these years that I mentioned in the beginning, like 2017, 2009, 2001, etc., there is something that might be worth re-examining, because this could be a reflection of all of that, especially as Mars is going to go back into your 10th house, and pretty much on the day that Venus is coming into Pisces. Mars is in opposition to Pluto, and then on the 6th of January goes into your 10th house. So there's tension in some way, shape, or form around your social status, or around how you aspire to show up socially, or even in your career. So this Venus in your seventh can also, it's especially important for you, Libra, because it's your ascendant ruler, or ruling the sun or ruling the moon in Libra. There's something about career, something about your marital status, something about relations of all kinds, the way you engage in relationships, perhaps, and with whom, and how they pan out for you. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just that it's something that might require you to reflect on choices, or reflect on your overall long-term aims, which is what Mars is getting you to do. Watch the Mars video that I did, which is a lot more thorough and sign by sign as well. So I can't go into all of it. It's just way too much all at once. Or you can get the annual readings, which are still on sale until the 6th of January. And they're at a 25% discount. And then you can hear what I have to say about more of these different points going through the year. All right, Libra, and that's it for you. And I'll see you in the next video. All right, sorry about that, Scorpio. I had to feed the dog. So for Scorpio, Sun, Moon, and Ascendant sign, we have this happening in your 5th house. So Venus is moving into your house of love and romance and children, and your creative self-expression, and how you reach out into life through yourself, through who you are, how you show up. And this is actually a really lovely thing for your creativity. If you're a creative type, this will be fantastic for you. And equally, if you're not, it might inspire you towards that, because you're also going to have the North Node moving into your 5th house at the same time. So then you have North Node, Neptune, Pisces, Moon, Saturn, many, many times over the first few months of 2025. And this will bring out an enormous amount of creative desire, or romantic desire, and or maybe both, or maybe some just newfound harmony with your children, or maybe if there are no children, maybe children coming on the way, where you are, where you're starting to plan for children, or where you're planning a pregnancy, for example, or where you are planning an adoption or something like that. Especially because Mars is in your 10th house of parenting. That might be part of the story. It can also be part of the career path for you, especially if you're an entrepreneur. So Mars is your ruler, and it's opposite Pluto, which is your so-called modern ruler, Pluto in the 4th. So changing your foundations in terms of what makes you feel secure, where you live, perhaps, maybe how you work, also in terms of home, home, working from home. So many options. I won't bother trying to figure it out, but it's just to say that this is a very creative and joyful place to have Venus in the 5th house. One thing to be aware of is overindulgence, just making sure that there's not too much excess, or if there is a kind of a blast, like a love at first sight kind of energy, it's almost pointless to say it, but do take it slow, and you've been warned. It also doesn't mean that you can't have a lasting relationship. It just means that you're often going to have a lot of ins and outs in the months ahead. If there is a new relationship that comes under this type of influence, where there's such a strong dynamic for really massive change, it could be very karmic. I would need to see your chart to see if that's something that's affecting the degrees specifically of your chart. That might tell me more, but otherwise, just take it slow And no doubt that your creative self and your way of being yourself and how you show up in the world is going to be a big focus for you. How you reach out into the world. And if you do have children, this will be where the focus is very strong on your children. Maybe they're growing in new ways, or they're doing things that is taking you in this new direction. But it's very harmonious, and it does look like there can be a really favorable relationship with your children overall. Fifth house is intellect as well, and as Mars goes back into the ninth house of your higher learning, for quite some time, where Mars will be staying then till mid-April, you might have this with this back and forth with Venus going back and forth into the fifth, and then the North Node in the fifth, you might have a desire to study or teach. And also Venus is going to be retrograding in your sixth house of your health, everyday work, or health/illness, everyday work, environment, and your colleagues and people that might work for you. The sixth house is all the stuff that you have to do that is, the bookkeeping and all the gritty stuff that you have to do every day just to get the day sorted. Bringing structure into your day, for example, having a good schedule. When Venus is in there, these things become easier. But at the same time, it might also be where there might be some nonetheless tensions with colleagues or issues with staff, because it's Venus in Aries. And so especially as Chiron is in there, there may be something that requires a little bit more caution or some reassessment, let's say. Venus also in the sixth house is not ideal for relationships that she's ruling the seventh house, ruling Taurus in the seventh. So when Venus is in the sixth, it can be that relationships are not working out so well, or there's some issue around relationships, or that there's some kind of dilemma that requires resolution. But when Venus goes back into the fifth, you'll find that resolution. There's some creative and very loving and very even romantic and very harmonious energy there. It's a very favorable place, the fifth house. It's trine to your sign and trine to the ninth house of good fortune. So the fifth is also a fortunate house as well. Right. So Scorpio, I think that's it for you. So fifth and sixth house are setting you up for when Venus moves into the seventh, where the quality of your relationships can consolidate, let's say. So whatever it is that you're working towards here, let's say from January through May, or the end of May even, will bring you the results for the people that you want in your life by late May and June. Right. And of course, your everyday life is changing quite dramatically anyway, because you've got that Neptune-Saturn going in the sixth. I'm doing a separate video on that, so I won't go too deep into that. But yeah, do pay lots of attention to your health as well at this time. So good luck, Scorpio, and I'll see you in the next video. Sagittarius, Venus is moving into your fourth house of home and your inner home as well. So what you might consider to be your psychological home, your foundation for life. And that's whatever makes you feel secure. So Venus in Pisces can be a really harmonious place. Jupiter is still in your seventh house, your ruler. And it's still retrograde until the 4th of February. So it's ruling all of this fourth house activity. And it will probably feel a lot better moving into February, March, April, than the initial impact of Venus, which can feel a little bit unclear. Venus might be impacting also your work in the sense that the fourth house is opposite the 10th, and that's also where we have Saturn. So there may be something that you're realizing about what you need truly to be happy, and you're finding out it's not this job, it's not this thing. I do not want to do this job. I don't like where I'm living. I don't like my whatever, and I'm not going to go there anymore. So there's quite a lot that you can discover with Venus going back and forth through your fourth house. And a lot of it has to do with what you need. So think about that. What do I need to be happy? What do I need to feel content? So pay attention to the signals of Venus throughout January and into the first week of February. She's going to be showing you a lot about what you need. And this can be a really good intuitive opportunity to listen in and then take action as the months move forward, so that something very new comes through June and July. Then Venus in the 5th house is quite lovely, because that's also in a trine to your 1st house of self, as well as your 9th house of your vision for your life. And these are fortunate houses. These trinal houses, 1, 5, and 9, are fortunate houses. When Venus goes into your 5th, she can bring you new quality of relationships. For example, that's the house of romance and love. It's your creative self-expression. So that can also really improve in the sense of you feeling like you want to reach out into a new way of being yourself, a new way of expressing what is in you, who you are, just literally how you are, how you show up like a young child radiating out. And Venus in the 5th can be very, very creative energy, especially inspirationally so, with the Aries quality. You've already had the North Node going through there, so you've probably discovered quite a lot about that, but Venus brings an extra flavor of that. Then she will station on the 1st of March, pretty much at the point at which the eclipse will be happening on the 29th of March. So there's quite a lot of March that is focused on the first 10 degrees of Aries in your 5th house. And that's going to be teaching you something about this connection to yourself, or how you want to express yourself. If it's about children, it can be something that's happening in their lives, or that's something with reference to you having children, or what you need to be doing for children, how that might affect your life, how that might affect your love life for that matter, and your values. And so, of course, that's also something Venus represents, as values and your self-worth, your value. So as Venus is moving back and forth between the 4th and 5th, I'd say the bottom line is feel, what do I need to be happy? And how do I manifest my happiness? And how do I show that? How do I really act out through my life this joy that I have in me, that I'm understanding, or this feeling of peace and security that Venus can bring in the 4th house? How can I bring that out into a creative dimension in my life? That can be through a love relationship as well. It can be through children as well. Or creative, like dance, for example. Dance is also 5th house stuff. What else would that be? And so moving house, Saturn is in your 4th, so that wouldn't be surprising. Moving house, also intending to move due to work or change of work. The South Node is going through your 10th house, and then the North Node goes through the 4th on the 11th of January. And so that might be something involving a move. Either way, it will be quite significant and long-lasting, because what's going on here, although it's chaotic in the early months of 2025, it will bring lasting change, right? So good luck with that, Sagittarius, and I'll see you in the next video. Capricorn Venus is moving into your 3rd house, and then she'll station retrograde in your 4th house. So the 3rd house is all about siblings and the way that you communicate and exchanges of all kinds. It's about your local space, the local community around you. It's your friends that you have coffee with, and your pals, the people that you go to the football game with or whatever. It's your siblings as well, extended family. And so if you're into business, this can also be something to do with commerce as well. So quite favorable when Venus goes in there, especially also if you're a writer of any kind, if you have something that you need to express, you'll find a beautiful way to say it, or a creative way to say it, a way that can connect people and have people listen, really hear you. And that's a teaching axis as well, the 3rd and 9th. It's about learning as well as teaching. So you may decide you want to reach out into some kind of teaching role, mentoring, teaching, practical advice or something. You can also learn a skill that's connected to art, like an instrument. 3rd house would be like 2nd house is the aesthetic, and the 3rd house is the mode. So the instrument, for example, is it painting? Is it playing violin? Is it I don't know, modeling clay? Are you building antique cars? What third house is skills. And so when Venus goes in there too, especially as Neptune is there and then Saturn and then the North Node, it looks like there's something that's drawing your attention. It can be something that becomes um, um, a rentable skill, something that you can actually earn money from. Maybe that's rentable. But anyway, so yeah, so that Venus in the third can be very nice for communicating with people, connecting with people of all kinds. And then she goes into the fourth house, and that's quite good for you to feel a little bit better about yourself emotionally, psychologically, maybe even materially, where you have a sense of feeling solid and grounded. Go back over these dates. I mentioned 2017, 2009, 2001, 93, 85, and so on, every 8 years back, because this fourth house was the place. That was where everything was happening. And so much of your life was changing in those years. And it's going to have a similar flavor this time, especially 2017 and 2009, because that was when there was this exchange between Venus going retrograde in Aries and going back into Pisces. And the other years, it was only in your fourth house, only in Aries. So there's quite a dynamic here that you can learn from the past, as always, Capricorn, because that's very strong in your chart anyway. Right. And yeah, I think that's it, Capricorn. So it's something to do with maybe house and home, your place of what makes you feel secure, what makes you feel happy, and you're reconsidering that. Maybe wait if you need to buy property. There may be something that needs to be reassessed, maybe something that you didn't realize about the property itself or about the actual act of purchasing the property, or maybe you're just changing your mind, or something is pulled off the market or something comes on the market, etc. So all these retrograde and shifting of the nodes and so on is going to be some pretty hairy energy for a while. So don't expect to have lasting answers until May or June, or even potentially July. So good luck with that, Capricorn, and I'll see you in the next video. So Aquarius, Venus is moving into your second house where you have Pisces and your ruler is currently there. And and so Venus will be traveling through most of January into the first week of February, through Pisces and then into the third house. And then that's going to be where she retrogrades on the 1st of March. And so she'll station retrograde at 10 degrees, 50 minutes of Aries in your third house. And there's something that's going to resonate with the times gone by in 2017, 2009, 2001, 1993, 85, etc. And so look at what was going on in terms of your relationship with your extended family or your siblings, or your sense of what you needed to take action on, willpower, what did you need to take a decision on. And Venus is going to go back and forth through your house of values in the meantime. So that's like the bookends to this retrograde. And the values that you're bringing, your own sense of value and the values that you have, as well as potential assets that you have, are all part of this story. So whatever the retrograde is about, it might be something to do with a choice that you have to make. And it could be a commercial choice, because third house is commerce, business, and you've also got Mars in the seventh as well, which is also a business house, and it rules your 10th, which is your career. So if this is a business choice, there may be something that you need to reassess, or it's about how you earn money, or it's about what you do with your assets. How are you going to manage your assets? For example, you've got Jupiter, which rules the seventh, not in super strong dignity at the moment, and it's retrograding. So if you're investing or wondering about investing, this might be something at the moment that doesn't quite show up as you want, or it might be delayed. The results might be delayed. It doesn't mean it's not going to happen. But in terms of investing, this would be an opportune moment to invest, but you better know what you're doing, because there's so many moving parts here that things can go, they can go wrong, or there may be a doubt around, did I do the right thing? Now, February will start to show you the answer to that question. Venus will be moving into your third, and Jupiter will be moving direct at that point in your house of investing and taking risks and so on, which rules your assets house. It rules your second house. It can also be about family, by the way. And of course, this can represent children. Jupiter in the fifth can be children. And the second house in general is family and what supports you. When Venus moves in there, it can be extremely helpful because you've had Saturn in there for quite some time. So it may have felt like you've been doing a lot of the heavy lifting yourself. And now, as Venus goes in there, it feels like you've got some relief or somebody else is helping. Just more assistance, more help, or maybe quite literally more income coming in, more possessions, more stuff coming in. You have the North Node going into your second house, so there's a lot more of attention, more of your attention going on your valuables, your possessions, your investments, your stores of reserves or money, and that also includes your own what you bring to the table. Like you are your resource as well. So your resources in general look to be a big focus for this time throughout the first few months of the year. Right. I think that's about it for Aquarius. It's of course a big year for you, Aquarius. We've seen that in other videos, but good luck with this. It looks very favorable. And Pisces, finally, Pisces, you of course are having this happening in your first house for the ascendant and the sun, moon as well, because it's the first from those planets or the luminaries. And so it's lovely having Venus going into the first house because it's you. It feels like you, and it brings you a lot of favorable attention. It's a quality that can be very charming and very agreeable. So it smooths all of the other areas of your life, especially if it's your ascendant. It's going to be helpful for you in lots of other domains of your life. This can be especially favorable for you to harmonize relationships that may have been a little rocky or that may have kind of fizzled out for a little bit or have been maybe something that was disrupted because you have Uranus in the third, that's where you have your kind of house of local friends, like your coffee buddies and so on, and siblings and extended family. And so if there's been a distance there, if there's been some tension or disruption there since Uranus has been going there back and forth since 2018, this is an opportunity for you to find a little bit more ease and settle that down a little bit. It can be very nice for you. You'll just feel very positive about yourself. Maybe an issue of your appearance, for example, feeling more confident in your appearance. Venus also rules your what does Venus rule? Your eighth house of marriage, your eighth house of what you share in relationships. It can be through marriage or the benefits of marriage, you could say intimacy and so on. So maybe there's something here also that is improving in terms of your quality of relationship energy. Certainly something's been changing there as the South Node's been moving through your eighth house for the year and a half preceding this. And then the South Node goes into your seventh and puts the North Node in your first house, where Venus is going to bump into it 3 separate times. So please watch the beginning of this video. I think it's quite long, but there's just so many moving things, moving planets, moving parts, so many things to say. And so there's something here about you that is changing, and it's a big cycle that's changing, an 18-and-a-half-year cycle that's changing. Then Venus moves into your second house of your self-worth, your incomes, sort of what you have available to you, your resources. Think of yourself also as a resource. And so whatever you hold value in and your own values as well. And that also implies family. Second house is connected to your family. And so that can also help smooth a lot of those things along. So you feel that there's something shifting in your relationships with your family, or in terms of what's available to you. Do you have more income available? Do you have more money to spend? Do you have more do you feel like you have more to offer, for example? And then that's where the retrograde comes. And that is where whatever's coming up needs to be questioned. It's going to have to change. It's going to be, it's going to be shaken up. Something is going to be disrupted or questioned at that time around the 1st of March, when Venus is going to get to the 10-degree 50-minute mark of your second house in Aries. And that might be having you question either money, investments, or what you're doing and how you're doing it. Now, Mars has been going through your sixth house of your everyday work. Then it goes into your fifth house, which represents children and your self-expression and your lovers, romantic relationships, what you love to do, your hobbies, and so on. And so this might be part of this bigger arc of the story of Mars, because Mars is ruling that second house where Venus is retrograding. So I need to see your natal chart to see where you are on the scheme of all of this, but certainly it looks like something that you're personally invested in, or that it's going to personally affect your finances and your self-worth. Look back to 2017, 2009, 2001, 1993, and 1985 to see any kind of resonance with all of these things when Venus retrograded again in Aries each of those years. So quite significant times, very big change on the horizon for you, Pisces, and I wish you every success. So thank you for making it this far, for those who have. And just another reminder that if you want to have more of the detail of the whole year, I still am selling the 2025 forecasts, and there's a discount up until the 6th of January at 25% off on my store. I'll put that link in the description box below this video. I do appreciate you so much. Thank you for being with me all this time, this very, very long video. And I do appreciate your comments, your likes, and your subscribes, because it also helps me to share what I have to say with more people. So I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye-bye.